find something that interests you, that motivates you, right? And dig in, and grow your passion.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Jean-Michel, very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Sylvan, what an honor to be on this show. You know, when I was 20, I probably expected to make my life in such a way to be on a show like yours. So thank you very much for having me, especially in these troubling and changing and difficult times. Thanks for having me. All the audience, thanks for listening. Hope you're going to enjoy what we have to share.
I'm sure there's an exciting story ahead of us, and we are super excited to have you on the show. Your claim to fame is basically the director of engineering at Day Software. Today, you are the vice president of engineering at Adobe. We talk about the exit of Day Software to Adobe, but first we want to talk about your personal background. So that will take us back to 1987. You were in the US with your family and worked a minimum wage job at Radio Shack in New Jersey. And I just want to know, how has, working a minimum wage job shaped you? What have you learned there? How has that shaped and also changed you?
Thanks for asking the question. I think it is interesting, right? So I was at high school, sort of the Swiss kid there. And then I went to worked around in different jobs, and I spent quite some time at Radio Shack. Radio Shack, for those who don't know, that's an electronics store, but that also sells resistors and capacitors. For those that may remember, in Basel, there was a shop called Griedel. Now everything is online, doesn't exist anymore. And what was interesting, there were a couple of learnings there, Silan. I think, first of all, I was on commission. I think it was 6% of what we were selling, or minimum wage, whichever was more, on an average of 2 weeks. And so if you had the Monday morning shift, you were stocking it. And so you were not doing a lot of selling. Another experience that I think was insightful, or was a visceral understanding, was a colleague of mine, when I was new, told me, Jean-Michel, if you have any questions, don't worry, come to me and I will help you. And, there were these resistors. They were like 99 cents a piece. I did the calculation in one of those moments, to calculate, if I write up the receipt, this is written up by hand, so you could do marketing with them, that I couldn't write up the receipts fast enough to get above minimum wage if I would be selling resistors and capacitors all 2 weeks long. So this person comes to me, I still remember his name, won't call him out, did a good job. And he said, I'll help you. And the big sales were the alarm systems or the phones. Phones in those days, you have to imagine, that was a car battery with a handle on it and a 2-meter antenna on top of it. Or a computer system, a TRS-80, Trash 80. They were $1,000. That was a good sale. A couple of those and you made your 2 weeks. So he came to me. He said, explain, yeah, sure, have questions. Customer came in. Sure, I went to him. And then the customer talked to me, then went to him. And at the end, he closed the sale. Well, commission goes to the person who closes the sale. Ka-ching. First time, last time, but that's when you understand sort of what closing sales are. Or another example, which I think is a learning for me, is I was talking to a customer, and we spent half an hour, 20 minutes with a customer, and then they walked out again. And in the trainings, we had some video cassettes. They said every customer who comes in wants to buy. It's your job to convince the emotion that you close them, to actually sell them. And in this moment, my boss came to me, who had another 1.5% or 2% or 3% on top of my commission, said, Jean-Michel, you see that customer walking out the door? That is your salary working out the door. And so I think these are very visceral experiences for a young person, and sort of, what gives?
Absolutely. You already learned selling basically early on in your life, right? Because you grew up in a family business where carpets were sold. So did you already have that in your genetics to learn how to sell and to be able to be a good salesman?
Well, I'm not sure if I had it there. I lived it. So I think there was a whole floor of the house dedicated. I think that was a different type of sale. That was a sale by appointment. And so you had like a captured audience, and the probability that the customer was going to end up at least with a selection where they would buy something was very high. I think what Radio Shack brought to me was a sale that wasn't so imminent, right? That it was optional. The person could walk out and you have to close them. You have to convince them. Right. Another thing, after 20 minutes, because the sales were smaller, you had to say, ma'am, how would you like to pay for this? Cash or credit card, right? Get to a close. So I think some of the relationship pieces were learned from the family, but sort of the closing or getting to the landing the value with the customer in the moment when they're ready to land it, I think that was a takeaway for me. And obviously that I wanted to do something else with my life than just work at minimum wages or filling out forms by hand.
Sure.
So
you then actually decided to go back to Switzerland for your studies. First of all, the question, why going back to Switzerland and not staying in the US with your experience and probably also the social circle and the network that you already built there?
Well, it's cheaper. So the economics are significantly better. And I think if you look at ETH or EPFL, I'm not sure where they are today, but in those days, they were in the top 20 schools worldwide in some of those ratings. So I think you get in Switzerland, and we have a very good educational system, and it is a heck of a lot cheaper. I think family situation also played a role, but I think the economics of it, right? If you wanted to get that level of education in the US, I would have had to sell a heck of a lot more of those batteries and to finance it, right? Those cell phones and stuff like that.
Fair point. And then you decided to study computer science at both ETH and also EPFL. Why did you decide to go for these studies and not something else? What was so appealing to you to go for computer science?
Interesting. I think there's two pieces. First of all, that computers, if I don't understand something, that motivates me, right? I want to understand. And I had, in the US before I studied, I started up a bulletin board system, brought that into Switzerland, started up a bulletin board system there as well. But I was using them, I was programming with them, but I didn't truly understand it. And that's, as I had the opportunity, I wanted to spend understanding that. Now, I still want to understand geography and I do want to understand chemistry, but I ended up choosing that because that was sitting in front of me. And sort of I started in Zurich. Ich kann Deutsch reden, bin ein Schweizer for those that can. Mais avec un nom comme Jean-Michel, je parle aussi français. Alors, l'EPFL was sort of a good alternative. My wife wanted to go there. And I liked the connection with the industry that the EPFL had.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. So you basically follow your personal interest, what you were curious about, to find out and better understand in really deep understanding that you wanted to develop there.
Yep, absolutely. And I think this is also important for everyone listening here. I think find something that interests you, that motivates you, right? And dig in, and grow your passion.
How did you realize that you arrived at the right spot? Like, did that feel any different from other things that you've tried? Or were you always just, very high energy and you could go basically after whatever you wanted because you had a very high energy level? So my question is basically, how did you find what you were really passionate and curious about? What helped you to find that out?
I think that's a very good question, because if I remember when I was starting out my career, I also heard that advice, go after what you're passionate. It's like, okay, but I like a lot of things. So I think it is partially also chance, or it is what I called forced luck, meaning that you have a multitude of choices and just go after a couple of them, right? Find out, be open for them, be open also to switch and try something else. I don't think there is a perfect answer, but I think it is something. Why I think do people say go after what you're passionate? Because you'll be spending a lot of time on it. And if you're just doing it to get the job done, you won't be as good than if you're actually interested, motivated, and you're curious, and it gives you something back. But when I was at this age, I heard the same, at this stage in my career, I heard the same feedback, and I was asking myself, well, now, what do I choose? What do I do? Right? This was like, and I wouldn't stress about it. I would do a conscious choice. I wouldn't stress about it, but I would pick one and just go for it and try it out. And if it fits, if the shoe fits, cool, keep on doing it. If not, then go get a pair of sandals and go after them, right?
Absolutely. There's a nice quote from Naval Ravikant, the famous business angel investor from the US. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something similar to, when you are hitting the sweet spot, it feels like play to you, but like a lot of work to others. And that's probably the sweet spot that you might be aiming for. So something that feels like play to you, but is a huge effort for others, that's probably the sweet spot you want to go for.
I couldn't have said it better. I think it just it doesn't feel like a chore, right? You just like doing it. You get up in the morning and say, what else, right? What can I do? How can I? And so that's cool.
Exactly. So finishing or wrapping up your educational part, you then actually went back to the US. So you did an MBA at the University of California. And I wonder, so before you said, hey, it's too expensive to study in the US, and then you actually went back. Did you make a lot of money in between, or why did you decide to go back?
Good question. A lot of money, no. The first year, we couldn't even afford to fly back to Switzerland. So I think we started out and we were scrappy. But I think it did improve dynamically. We had the education reimbursement program from many large companies, including Adobe, where I'm at right now, but many companies have that. And I was able to do that, keep on working, and do that part-time. And that was also one of the choices why I chose Berkeley, because they did pick you up in a large 50-person car down in the South Bay. I think Krispy Kreme is there right now. And they drove you up. And so that was, you didn't have to commute. You were able to do some project work with your colleagues. I think the logistics of it were, I think, the piece that amazed me the most. I think doing the MBA itself, you had Greenspan come in and talk. You had John Durr that you could talk to and have he was presenting, and afterwards you could have an interaction. So you're in the middle of things, and that was very exciting.
I can imagine. Yeah, that actually shaped you in an additional way, right? You had the top schools from Switzerland, actually both top schools, and then you went to another top school in the US. I also wonder now, the MBA part is actually more of the business education before you had the technical education. So is it actually possible to be both a tech guy, but also a business or a marketing and sales guy?
This is a question I think I've been thinking about a lot. We chatted about this earlier, and I think for me it's natural, right? I don't know, and for me I couldn't be one without the other, and so I think for me it's possible. I do think that you have your strengths and weaknesses, but I think it's a combination of actually doing innovation that lands in a business context that makes the innovation really, the engineering really interesting for me. Creating that product that understanding the business problem and the business value, and then being able to not just solve the point problem, but help the customer in the point problem, and then go back and reflect what is the fundamental pattern. And so you're at a customer, you're hearing what is, you find them a solution in the now. I don't want to call it, it's stable and it helps and it works for them. But then go back and you reflect, what could we do to actually change this by an order of magnitude? And I think I need the business exposure personally, and for me and the team, to actually then find the fundamental innovation. And so I think those are exciting. And I do think that even, if young entrepreneurs are listening here, do know your numbers, right? Even if you're just a scientist, and the numbers do matter, right? And so I think you need, at least if you need both, a little bit of both, at least a little bit, right? If it's not your passion, do understand what a P&L is, right? Because the cash flow will burn out if you don't.
Absolutely. Well, it's also interesting, if you think about startups in the early days, there you need to have someone who can actually build the product, but also someone who can actually sell it. And now what gets really powerful is what you seem to have done. If you combine both and you're actually capable of doing both, of building products, but also of selling them, then that's like a whole different level. And I think that's really, really interesting to have this mix that you have acquired here with your MBA on top of that. And that is just so powerful.
Silan, you're very gracious. It's just me, right? So I don't, it works for me. So anyone who wants to try it, feel free. But I do think that I think it makes it exciting, right? It makes it truly exciting that you are in front of the customer, you're iterating on your pitch, and you go home and you try and see, you look at their facial expression and you see didn't quite land it. Why not? Especially, I'm not, being an engineer, I'm not sort of the best marketeer, but I think it's this interaction that lands it, and I think that helps innovation. And I think all innovation that I've seen is through iteration and through landing it with the business, right? With the business value at the end.
Right. And also, just observing your energy level when talking about that, I think one can really tell that you are in the sweet spot.
Thanks a lot.
So
I'm happy. I'm good.
That's all that counts in the end. So let's also focus on your professional career after the educational part. In 2000, you joined Embrace Networks. You were the director of software engineering there. I think looking at Crunchbase, the company raised about 28.5 million in a Series B round. So I want to know from you, first of all, why did you join Embrace Networks in the first place and not start your own company in the US, for example, as an alternative?
That's a good question. I did already start my own service, a bulletin board in '88 earlier, and that was sort of like an internet website with a modem, a bulletin board system. And so I had that, and I ended up decided not to do that and then start the studies because I didn't get the scale I wanted. Right, so I had good ideas at the point. I was offering a competitive offer. So you could find the solutions, but I didn't get the scale I wanted. And so I did want to try out while in the US. I wanted to not just sit next to the startup life, but be part of it. We did, through the MBA, had the opportunity to found something ourselves, but I was concerned to get to the scale fast enough. So then I was looking around, what is the best mix? And Embrace was interesting. And, it was going after the Internet of Things. It was just a couple of years too early. So we had a very interesting proposition. And, today, Internet of Things, obviously, right? Everybody knows about it. It's almost passé, but there it was too early. But it was exciting at the time.
Absolutely. And you seem to be a very eager learner. So what did you learn there during your time at Embrace Networks? What did you take away from your time there?
I think going with the market, right? So while the concept of Internet of Things is a valid concept, and while building the product for the Internet of Things was a valid product, the market wasn't quite ready for it. And so the timing of the market, the timing of the customer's appetite, but in hindsight, I don't think it could have switched, right? It could have been that company that actually flipped the coin and would have sort of got the ball in the rolling. I think the complexities may have just been a little bit too high, or sort of the dynamics, or that one deal and that next deal didn't quite come. But I had a lot more awareness about the market dynamics afterwards, and validating them or validating my hypothesis with the market more than what I would have done, what I did before.
Right. Yeah. The Swisspreneur founder, Alain Chiar, he always mentions that even in the episode that was the first one on the podcast, timing is probably one of the most underrated factors of success for a startup company. So in that regard, my question is, can you actually influence the timing to a certain degree, or can you just try to understand it and then accept it or change your plan, but not really influence it in any positive or negative way?
I do think you can influence it, but I believe you need to understand it and you need to play it, right? It needs to be a lot more conscious. If you look at what we're doing right now at Adobe, we're doing what no one will come to that afterward. We're doing what no one else has done before. There is no timing for changing the industry that we're doing, but we're doing it. If you look at sort of Roy writing his REST thesis, he was a friend of mine and a peer at the day in Adobe, who wrote the HTTP protocol. Right? If you think about it, there is no perfect time, but you can influence it, and being aware of the market dynamics and how you take what is there, what dynamics do you have, and you build your wave with that. I think that is how I would say it. I don't think if you wait for the timing to be obvious, you may already be a round 2 or round 3 player, which has also its attractions, but it's being aware of it. Are you the first one? What do you need to do if you're the first one? If you see the timing and you're a second or third player, how do you approach it from there? I think there's different game plans for different stages of the timing.
Yeah, and you really need to praise this or practice this awareness of where's the market, where are you, also in relation to the other players around there. I think that's a really great key takeaway here. Now, let's also focus on the time after Embrace Networks. You actually left before the company had its exit and was sold. So why did you decide to leave?
I think it's a combination of factors. The personal factors were probably the most important ones. I'm happily married for, 25 years now, and a lucky dad of 4 kids. And at that time, that was before the kids. So I had the happily married portion, but not the kids. And we wanted that. And I think it was a combination also of seeing that the company, the realization that the company was early.
Yeah,
and
got it.
But I do think it's probably about 80% the family reasons and 20% the sort of the environment situation.
Exactly. And then you joined Day Software as your next move in Switzerland. Maybe you have to give a bit more context here first. So Day Software is a Swiss-based company that still does, web applications and manages content for global companies. And before you actually joined in 2000, Day Software went public. That's like massive for a Swiss company, I would say, having done this startup path and then doing an IPO. I hope we see more of that in the future, hopefully. But maybe just to give the context of what made the decision for you to say, hey, I want to go and work at Day. How did that happen that you ended up at Day and went back to Switzerland?
So to go back to Switzerland, I think that was the family driver. And then having tasted earlier I did work at Siemens, so I knew sort of a large company environment here in Switzerland. But I was looking for a younger, more dynamic company. And I actually talked to probably all of them on the Swiss New Market, it was called at that point, which was sort of the hot market. And I think for Day Software was the one that clicked the best. And actually, we were flexible to be anywhere in Switzerland. But having seen Day, we ended up choosing Basel. And I'm originally from Basel, so that's a coincidence. But I think the causality was because of Day. And I think if you look at they were solving, and we still are solving an interesting problem.
What is that?
We are trying to sell a service or software at that point, and now it's a service that tries to give the inherent premise of that is that you can have the same or similar service for multiple customers into an environment where customers want a unique experience. So if you look at sort of some of our customers, the largest brands that are out there, I don't know, pick any brand you wish and then pick sort of their competitor. They want to differentiate themselves through the experience, because what they want to do with a digital experience is they want to leave an impression. What I usually say, experiences are what stays when you close your mind and you shut off your phone, right? What stays with you, or the action you take before you close that is what is a digital experience. And digital experiences talk through emotions, imagery, video, stories. And here's a company that's trying to make that repetitive. But then if it is repetitive, right, have a tool, have a service that everyone uses. But if it is repetitive, it's not uniquely differentiated. So that's like a conundrum in and of itself, right? It's like trying to solve opposing objectives at the same time. And so that's intellectually interesting.
And in the end, I guess that's what's then really appealing to accept the job there, right? Because you have intellectual stimulation for a person as you, probably also the business and technology part combined again, and you can learn and develop. That's what you were looking for. Absolutely.
I have my hair stand up just thinking about it. I think it's viscerally interesting. And it is, I've been doing this content thing now for 20 years. And I still think I can see how to make it yet even better for our customers. The product that we just launched earlier this year, I'm so excited about it because it is fundamentally changing the industry, right? So been at it for 20 years and now I grokked it how, or the team and I grokked it how to go to the next level. And it is sort of a testimony to the fundamental innovation, or to what I said before, right? Understanding it at its source. And if you're just adding a bit and piece there, that is okay, but that doesn't give you long differentiation or long value. And they had the opportunity to create that. It was content management, so managing the content for creating digital experiences that lead to a business objective. If you're a government, that you can reach your inhabitants, that you can provide your services if in a way which is nice, which is good, effective. If you're a school, how to deliver your content, your training. If you're a brand, how to deliver your message and how something stays with you, right? Connect emotionally and be different for every customer, but still have the similar service. It's cool. It's interesting.
This energy, it's really so remarkable, and I wish that there are more people out there that really share this passion. This is so cool to watch and observe, really.
Thank you.
So let's also look back, to the timing again. When you joined the IPO, but around the 2000, there was also something else happening, right? The dot-com bubble basically hit or burst actually shortly after you joined Day. So can you walk us through how this has affected you, but also the company, of course? So what happened with Day and the dot-com bubble?
Yeah, sure. Interesting. And if you talk about timing, that was poor timing on my part because I joined after the IPO. But, I'm still able to sort of create awesome services with the team. So that's exciting. I think that at the time when the IPO actually happened, I don't remember exactly, but 2-3 days after the crash started. And so if you think about timing, IPOs, for those that may not be in the details of it, but you have institutional investors who commit to buy some of the stock, and you actually do a roadshow with them before, right? So it's not everything gets thrown on the market on the first day, but you have some commitments already, commitments, and the institutional investors also want this because they do expect the new innovation to actually, the new IPOs to produce new innovation and new value as they become public. And so if you look at the timing, a couple of days after the market crash started, that is like the perfect timing, right? That's if you want to time the apex, and I've been told that, nobody can time the apex in markets. The Day team actually truly nailed it. And there are others that are locally who didn't quite nail it that much. But so that's an interesting story. At that point, sort of for timelines, I was still at Embrace, and we were then sort of after that trying to raise that round of money. And that's another, right? After the downside and everybody realized there's a crash, raising money in that environment is probably similar to raising money right now with COVID, right? Where everything is a little bit different. But everybody took a step back and said, hold on, and did an extra round. But I think so from a timing for Day Software, I think that was interesting that they went public just after that. They I don't remember, but it was a good hunk of change.
It's the 3rd of April, 2000 yes. Was the exact date.
Thanks, Zelan. You did your homework. Nice job.
No, actually, your colleague sent me the date.
Good job. So I think that's an interesting. Then I joined after that, and I think we were still in the rise. We still had money. We still had open positions. We were hiring. So I was joining a growth company when I came back. Right, full fire, intellectual problem that's here, resources that are available, all gung ho. Right.
And then,
well, after that crash, sort of people pull back from investing in the internet. I remember, I believe I had 14 open positions when I started that I was supposed to hire. I hired one person. He works still for us. He's out of near St. Gallen, remotely. I'm not going to name his name, but he knows who he is. And then sort of the rounds, the savings round started. And sort of first the open positions go away, and then you go, and I think we went through 6 or 7 rounds of reductions, which is another interesting experience. Well, interesting. It's an experience. I'm happy I have it, and I don't want to. I'm not going to call for it again. But it is a learning experience.
Right. So how did you handle these layoffs? Because I can imagine that's very intense, especially also the way that you worked with your teams and your colleagues. You were all pretty close. You were like, really pushing each other, supporting. So letting go of people, that's insanely hard and difficult to do, I can imagine.
Absolutely, you're right. I think change is hard. And if it impacts the livelihood of individuals, it's even harder. So these are people you know whether they're married or whether they're where they're living and what they need to pay. And so I think on the first two, with every change you have denial, right? Do we have to do this? And then you go through it, and then you go into execution. And as you realize, for execution, it's the human that starts to matter, right? And then you try to find solutions for the individuals. We were lucky that as a team, we changed part of it, the job that we were doing, and part of it for those that we had to let go, we were able to find homes for them, right? So I took time, the Rolodex of my friends, we started calling around. It probably didn't have this change the world innovation approach, but it was going to pay the rent, and it was, they were good jobs. And I think we did that up until the last round, and then we sat together and we something that's happening here now during the COVID days, and we said, what do we do, right? And actually the remaining team decided that we'll take a salary reduction. We'll go to Kurzarbeit, which is a Swiss speciality for those that are outside of Switzerland listening to this, where the unemployment insurance actually pays money while you're still employed for a certain amount of time if there is a chance for the business to pick up again. But a lot of paperwork, a lot of effort, and everybody was willing to sort of take a pay cut to just keep on going. And we were counting the days cash outstanding, days salary outstanding. So I think it's a very real cash situation, and on the other hand, a very intimate, person by person, people by people, trying to find a solution for each one of them. And then as a team, luckily was the last one. After that, it started to pick up again. But even as a team, deciding, okay, well, we want to stick together at this last core.
I think having that feedback from a team, and they all accepting to take pay cuts, some might even have suggested that on their own to really, make the company survive and go through that together. I think that's a very strong sign of a good company culture and the common mission that you onboarded everybody on. In terms of runway, is there anything that you can share? Because I'm just curious, what does it mean if you're counting the cash? Like, how much runway was still left in the extreme situations? Like, were you worried about paying the salaries for the next month? Or was it more like, okay, we can survive 6 more months, but then we really need to see? How was the situation in terms of how much oxygen did you still have in the company, basically?
Luckily, you forget much of the hard times, right? But I think the piece that I do remember is that we were looking at sort of if we had to terminate people, that we had enough cash to maintain the legal. So we were the line or the burn down line that I was looking at was sort of the time to actually be able to pay everybody out within the full legal concept. So right. I think it's termination period plus I think we had 2 months at that point.
Okay, got it. So I think it's just good for people to have a perspective on that. So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Another thing that, that there are certain visions or also strategic objectives and goals that you want to achieve as a team that can really push you together and make you pull through that all together and actually, get out stronger at the end of the tunnel, basically, if you go through something like that. So what importance had the strategic direction to really also align and keep the people motivated that you were still able to keep at the company?
I think the strategic direction was set up before and we stuck to it, right? Okay. We believe that we were the big players. We were not a big player yet, so we were a fast follower. But especially in this environment of opposing requirements, of diametrally opposed requirements, I think that the Swiss culture happens to be an asset. And our objective was to produce a software at the time, today a service that helps our customers be more effective, more efficient, to heighten content velocity. And at Adobe, we call it to change the world through digital experiences. And that was our passion. We wanted to do something so that people could express their offering, their desire, their idea through the digital experience and have a lasting message. And we did that. We realized one of the founders, David Nuschler, who's still with Adobe today, he very quickly realized that even though every project is separate, there are some things that are the same, and started out a standardization effort across the industry. Because we realized that if you have multiple systems, that you want to connect them together. At that point, I already had written 2 standards, and we had, as I said, Roy, who wrote the HTTP standard and the URI. So I was happy for Roy to be, his standards are a lot more popular than whatever I wrote. And so I've been there, done that. And David was just early on at deciding where to put that standard, where to put that technology. And he chose the Java, which was up and coming at that point. And as an API specification, JCR. And I think that was sort of a incarnation of that strategy, right? That we find an abstraction level that is true for the whole industry, that is the basis, that these are the base elements that every experience management, every experience wants to have, be able to version it, wants to be able to search for it, wants to be able to identify. So there is these fundamental concepts, and then we articulate that through the standard. And then as you get to these hard times, you have something that the business understood it because we saw the value at the customers, and the technologists understood it because we were driving this standard. Now, you don't need to have a standard to have a strategy on the technology side. It's just something that we happen to have had. And I think we stayed true through that idea to actually improve the world through doing more, just providing our service, but sort of investing energy into a standardization that will make everybody better because it's a good. We collaborated. There's many collaborations where they gave their input, and we found an abstraction that made the world. This is a bit cheesy, but it made the world a better place, right? Because this complicated problem, we all came into an agreement what the right distribution of tasks was and what belongs in and what belongs out, which then makes it a lot more effective and efficient for the customers to choose a solution. And I think then as you look at the engineers, we knew we had that in our hands. We knew this was sort of good. We had the validation from the industry. You had the big boys that were flying into Basel to have the workshops on this. It was one of the only times that the W3C architecture group came to Europe, and that was in Basel of all places. They just were here last year again, I think, which is the second time. So you feel like as a Swiss company, which is not selling cheese nor watches nor chocolate, you can have an influence on the world stage. And I think that gives a passion, that gives a direction to the people that you can do something good. And everybody was glued together to that idea of making the world a better place by helping on the content management front and the experience management.
And that's exactly the setup that then also pushes you through the hard and difficult times. I think that's a wonderful explanation how you manage this. So now for the second part of the deep dive questions, I also want to know more about how you actually managed and built your teams, because you were not only responsible for the product management, but also for actually managing the team, which grew exponentially before, but then also after, obviously, the .com bubble hit. And I just want to know, how do you actually successfully manage an ever-expanding team? Do you have any best practices and tips to share how you build a successful team and also manage them?
I'm not sure there is any magic. I think part of it is intuitive. But part of it, I think, is the respect for the individuals. I think what we're doing, if probably for most of the folks that are listening here, is we're creating something of intellectual value. And the intellectual value for us, it was software and online service. The intellectual value comes from the core of the person. So the people need access to infrastructure, right? Tooling, that's the basis. But then they need access to the problem space. And in our case, customers and the customer situations. And the opportunity to reflect both on the immediate and on the long term. And I think if you have people who are motivated, intrinsically motivated by creating something, and you can give them that becomes a unique differentiator. It's unique that you actually have to do the job you need to do here, but you also have the space to think deeper, to take a step back. As some of the folks that work for me will remember this sentence. I tell them, take off a couple of hours, go outside, watch the clouds move. Let your brain take a step back out of the immediate and think about the important. Try and synthesize what you have. Now, the more advanced, the more experience you have, the more conscious you allocate your time to do that. But I think even in the beginning, it's clear that you're not just you're trying to create something that is for longer, as well as sort of solving the immediacy of the situation that you have here. Again, the standards was an example I just mentioned. That's a long-term play, and then sort of for managing, I think it's less about managing and more about leading, sharing the passion, helping the individuals see the opportunity, see the potential that's there, and or stand with them in stressful times as much as you can, or get out of their way and let them do their job and give them cover. So I think depending on what it is, but I think it is about sort of the production engine of what most of the companies that we have here in Switzerland or Silicon Valley is the intellect. And the intellect works by enabling and articulating the objective, the problem, or giving them access to the problem space, and then letting the mind work and creating an environment. Right. Sometimes it's also sort of let's get it nailed. You do need results, but I think it's finding that balance. But it is, and I've gotten this as feedback, is the opportunity to actually create. That is valued and cherished.
Nice. If I had to pick one thing on top of that, it's the sharing of the passion. Can you give us an example how you actually did that with your team? Because I think your passion is so impressive. So I also wonder, how do you share and probably also inject that in your team and your team members?
I think it's different. If you're at in the early days, everybody knows everybody, and you're so close to each other that it just osmosis, right? And I don't think I was unique. I think it was everybody who had it. You don't have to be extroverted to be passionate. We have some folks that are very concentrated, but they are passionate about actually focusing on the process. So I think the passion was ended up being common. And you joined this unit. You wanted to have motivation. You needed to have the minimum background to actually not have your feet kicked away from under you while you landed, and then you were just dragged along. And I think then as you go to you move forward to now at Adobe, when we have a larger team and it's globally distributed, I think the tools are different. And knowing what I know now, I probably would apply some of those tools earlier as well. And I took a book out of the Amazon, and it's the 6-pagers. And I tried to articulate to do what no one has done before. Most everyone, to my knowledge, in the experience management has done experience management the way it's been done for the last 30 years, has built the solutions. And there's a couple of players out there. We're obviously the best, but and don't take my word for it. Take the analysts for it. We've been rocking it for years and years, or the partners. But anyway, it sounds weird when I have to say it. And we reflected, even being at the top right of these quadrants, the customers love business success. Can't we do better? And that's one of those moments, right? You go back and you reflect. We looked at sort of other patterns in the industry, looked at the transformation of the car industry. What did they do, right? Early on, the black and white imagery, right? You see them hammer out the individual car pieces. Then sort of the 50s, you have semi-automated. And if you now look at the modern, it's fully automated. Inspiration. What would that mean for us? And then you have another. So automation is one mega trend. I think the other, and in our situation with the cloud, there is new opportunities for that automation. And then there is artificial intelligence. And so we sat back and reflected. Imagine we could be like one of the consumer cloud products while allowing the extensibility of enterprise. And again, that's an opposing, right? It's diametrally opposed requirements. And you see people try and approach it. They go one way, but they cut off the other piece, right? They don't allow both flexibilities to be there. And to share that passion, what we reflected on, we did some research. We had looked at what blocks do we have that are absolute blocks, where everybody who looks at it says, well, I can't believe, unbelievable. And so we got some of those blocks. And then as we had, we saw there could be a small funken, a small spark at the end of the tunnel. We could actually reach it. Sat down, wrote a 6-pager, articulating the problem space, articulating the opportunity, and then shared that out throughout the whole team. And asked them, again, to do a fundamental change. And so I asked, we're a couple of hundred people who worldwide, that they change the way they've been working. And they in the past, you had developer develop, pass it over to QE, who was testing it, pass it over to operations, who was running it. And then operations had a problem, passed the problem back to QE, didn't test it, QE passed it back to the developer, so you didn't develop it, and that went, and the iteration speed was very slow. And in the cloud, you have the opportunity to be all this at once. You are the person who writes it, you are the person who tests it, you're the person who takes up the call on the weekend if it actually messed up. And that motivates you not to mess up. And so we put that concept into play. We described it. We did a pilot. We shared experiences. We ran defense. We gave the engineers time to actually make their code so that they wouldn't have to worry of waking up on the weekend. And we pushed that in the cloud, and out comes an innovation that, as I said, no one else has done in the industry before. And we're able now at an enterprise level with 100% uptime for at least periods of time. We do have bugs every now and then, but it's actually for long periods of time, 100%. And we can keep on pushing changes out like you could never do for an on-premise install, like you could never do before. And that's really cool. And so back to, how do you make that change? How do you share that passion? You get the unbelievable pieces that are truly, well, that will never work, out of the way, and then articulate that and thought it through a 6-pager in my case, and then each of the individual leaders bubbled it down to them, shared it with the team, and asked them to come along on that journey of transformation.
Wow. Awesome story.
Don't you just hate it when you listen to a really great podcast, but you have no one to talk to about it? We do too. And that's why you should give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. The wider our reach is, the more Swisspreneur fans will pop up all around you.
Now, I also wonder, how do you actually find the people in the first place? So you also need to find talent, right? Were there any unexpected tips or sources where you actually got your talent from that you then hired to join your company?
Good question. I think talent is key, and I think you also have different sources at different levels. I think early on, what we did is we looked on finding talent and selecting talent. Finding talent, we actually looked at people who were already doing part of the work that we wanted them to do, and we got visibility into it. And so me having done some work on Linux, Roy having founded the Apache Software Foundation, we had a connection to open source. And you find people who were in their free time or maybe part time were already coding on the stuff, or in a doesn't have to be on the stuff, but the work that they delivered was already demonstrating stuff that we said, that's cool. And so that was a good source. I think the social medias weren't and networks weren't quite as evolved at that point in time. And so you had to use that. I think now you have a lot more sources where you see, where do people express their passion, right? And then we were lucky ones giving them actually a day job, actually a day job and a job during the day, that allowed them to express their passion. And then I think comes to talent selection. There is a portion intuition, but we asked ourselves, how could we actually make it a bit fairer, make it a bit less arbitrary? And there is a standard of things that you have multiple people look at them. You have a similar set of questions. What we do look for is motivation. But then again, if you spend your weekends coding, you're somewhat motivated, right? So I think but you need motivation. You need to get to want to do something, right? And then you need a base knowledge so that you can actually keep up with the flow. But besides that, I have people with a psychology degree. I have folks with a biology degree, right? I think that I'm a little bit less. I have folks that don't have a degree. I'm a little bit less fixated on the actual degree. But I do want the people to then demonstrate it. But and the degree is an easy way to actually demonstrate a certain way. And then as it comes to the selection, what we did is for the technologists, we asked them to actually provide we gave them a coding example. And it's actually the same question for the last 20 years. And we did add variants for different languages and different skill sets. So we have variants. And what that does is it looks at the output of the work. So if you're looking for a photographer for your wedding or for your special day, you could ask them, okay, show me your portfolio, or show me what you would do with an animal in motion on sundown, right? So you have a question, a formulation, but it's relatively open. And then what the artist does with it, like what they do in code, will illustrate. You immediately see the technique, right? Was it sort of with a blurry old gen iPhone, or was it with a mirror camera, Spiegelreflex that it was done, or in the photography analogy? Or you see, if you watch it, you actually see their seniority or what they've done, but you also see the interpretation. What did they leave out? What they put in? Because it's an open question, and so we use that for selection, and we're still using it out there. But I think finding talent, back to your question, you first need to find them before you can select them, is about ideally finding those who are already in one way or another demonstrating a passion in it. And it doesn't have to be your domain, but it is a passion in the type of work you expect them to do, right? The type of thing, so that you can give them a happy path, or the where they feel like it's not a chore, but it's sort of fulfillment what they're going to get.
I think that's fantastic. Accessing platforms or communities where people that you're looking for in that space are already active in, are really living their passion, and then you give them a job to live that passion. I think that's wonderful takeaway to really think about that and ask yourself, where's your platform? Where's your community for the space that you're occupying with your company? Really wonderful tip. Now, let's fast forward a bit. Let's go to 2010. Adobe acquires Day Software for $214 million. Please walk us through the exit. How did that happen? Such a deal, especially by such a big and well-known company as Adobe is, doesn't just happen overnight. So please walk us through the deal, how it happened, and how it was to be part of that.
Sure, I'd love to. I think we were now sort of earlier, you asked sort of about the bust. Here we were on the uptake, right? We were doing really, really well. I think business has come back, and people realized that the digital channels more than ever were important, and we were providing a solution that helps customers get the content velocity, get the right message to the right person in the right time. We were booming. We also had new leadership come in that was here. So we were just doing really well. We did realize that the timing to take this energy and to ride this wave, we could get a lot more stuff on the ground if we had a bigger distribution channel. And so that was a realization that we had as a team. And just sort of exploding at that level that we saw the opportunity, or at that wave that was out there that was already happening in the numbers. I think at one point we were the fastest rising stock of all of Europe before that. And so I think as we were riding that wave, we realized, what do we do to actually to take advantage of this market dynamic? And so scaling out was sort of then one of the options that we had internally, and there was an internal option and there was through partners. And then as you're looking at it, we also looked at what would be a good partner. And being in the experience business, Adobe with their, what today is called Creative Cloud, was a beautiful opportunity. And we saw that then. And I just asked a question in preparation of this. Is it just me? Or I asked a couple of folks that were there. And actually, all of the people that work for me, -2, are still with me for 10 years ago. And the ones that I asked said, it was the right move. And if you can say 10 years after you were acquired, it's the right move, that's, and I also know that from the folks that were involved in the decision process, they're saying, this was a great move. So I think if both parties 10 years afterwards said this was a great move, I think that was good. Now, we didn't have that 10-year vision at that point, but it just felt right? It felt like to deliver on our objective, to help our customers get their individualized message across, but in a systemic solution that gets the economies of scale to them, so that each enterprise, each government's cost for getting the message there, sort of their velocity with which they can get to the people who want what they have, right? To connect that. Adobe was the perfect partner from a product mix, but also from a corporate culture. The two founders, engineers, our CEO, Shantanu, has an engineering background. So very product oriented, very value generating oriented. And I mean, take a look at the stock price, right? The Adobe stock price has been doing very well. I think I don't know where we're at. I think at the time of acquisition, we were at 30, and it exploded from there. Anyone listening to the podcast, take a look at the stock price. I think, and we had the opportunity, the good case that Adobe actually already was a customer of ours. So they were already using our product, and we were already working with them for the Adobe.com site itself. And Adobe.com, to give you an idea, is you have 1 to 3% of the daily internet traffic that goes through Adobe.com. So it's a nice use case.
Absolutely. I still want to. So you had them as clients. I think that really helped to also open a door. But you said like the plan, made perfect sense. But at a certain point in time, you still had to convince them and onboard them and make sure that they actually also see it the same way as you did it, that they see, hey, this actually makes sense, so we do acquire you. How did you make that happen?
They actually were in a transition. They just had launched, I think, a year before a marketing cloud, a digital experience, the experience cloud, we call it today. They acquired Omniture, realizing that creating the artifact, creating the beautiful content that speaks to the heart, that sort of, you turn it off and you keep on remembering it. You have that emotion, you carry it with you, right? You want to go back, you want to close that deal, you want to buy that, you want to use that service, right? That beautiful interaction. Looking at strategically, well, who was paying for that? It was marketing, right? It's the people. And so I think that's where the genesis came, that, okay, if we add the experience cloud, if we add experience management with all its different tools, so the analysis of what worked, what didn't work, that was the Omniture acquisition, now Adobe Analytics, the ability to actually give you the right content in the right moment, to the right time, in the right context, whether you're on mobile, whether you're on the web, whether you're walking by a digital screen with us on the trains or at one of the locations, in store, out of store. all these touch points that you get the right information at the right time. They had, for instance, what we use, Adobe Target. So they had a whole selection of pieces, and Adobe Experience Manager was the piece where you managed it and delivered those experiences. And there is a lot more Adobe Commerce to actually, which is Magento. You have Campaign, which is email for marketeers, which was Neolane, a company founded in Paris. We had Go Live out of Hamburg, that was earlier. So there's a lot of these technologies that were brought together, and I think that was a beautiful fit for the team and for us. And at the point when we were closing the deal, it was our job to see how our product would fit into that vision. How, if you have the ability to help the customers assemble those experiences, both through integrating to their backend systems, through coding, through creating whichever experience they need and a different experience for everyone, but then also for the marketeer to have an easy ability to create that content, reuse that content, create new campaigns. I think that is what convinced them. And then as we were giving these stories, the people who were talking to us in the M&A, they called up their friends from the IT department and said, you know, that's what they're pitching. Is that true or not? And we actually had a good product. So we got more yeses than our competition, they were looking at a couple of options, and it ended up being two rundowns. And I actually know the founder of the other company that was there, and they had the acquiree had a good relationship, even a better relationship. They already had they used that product already in their product suite for selling it, not just using it, but selling that product. So it was at OEM. So we were fighting uphill internally to replace them. And I remember I was at a pizzeria on the Rhine a couple of years before that, talking to that founder, and I still see him sitting in front of me. It used to be called Picobello. It has a different name now at the time. But I still see him sitting in front of me, and then you're there in front of the acquiree, Adobe, and now you're head to head. But it's a small industry, right? You tend to know each other. But so I think convincing with a value proposition that we had, how it fit the strategy, was sort of the piece, and then having the luck to have the internal reference. But also, we were a public company, so valuation was already more or less set, right? But we were very happy with it, and who can say 10 years after that, for me, everybody but two are still on the team, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Another important point that you mentioned in a Startup Ticker interview was the importance of showing impressive figures, but also the importance of being successful in the US market. So in what way did these two things also play a role in the acquisition of Adobe?
I think especially in our market, I think the services market, the software market in that time, now it's the cloud services market. The US is the biggest market out there. And if you want to fulfill in that opportunity, right? You see that growth, you see that hockey stick coming in, and you want to get to that marriage so you can deliver it. The US companies it works best if they already see that you already kicked the tires and you already have some base velocity. Especially in these acquisitions, the acquisitions are great in accelerating what already works. And given that for us the market is the US, and that is a key market for us, I think given the size of these companies, you already need to have a functioning support function, a functioning sales, a functioning pre-sales, post-sales, services, partners. If you have that, they can help you scale it. But if you don't have anything there, creating it is a lot more difficult. I mean, this is part of the reason why the companies grow through M&A, right? Because they do have it, and then they can come in and scale it throughout the business. And that's where the partnership for us was awesome. And I'm seeing work a lot for some of the other couple of dozen acquisitions that we have done. Adobe has done.
And there, you could all have also said, hey, we sell and then we're basically done. What made you stay there? Of course, the scale is one part, but why did you stay on like more than 10 years now? What kept you staying at Adobe, and why didn't they say, that's it, I'm done, I retire, or I do something else, start my own company whatsoever? What kept you there?
It's not like I didn't reflect on that question, right? So it's not just a given that you have that. But I do think the culture of where we landed and the strategic alignment is the basis that allows us to continue to innovate at scale. And to take an industry that's a couple of billion and actually have the audacity, say, with the innovation that we do, a couple of years down the road, it won't be the same. The efficiencies will be order of magnitude better. I think you need scale to do that. And there we have alignment of purpose. So alignment of strategy and alignment of purpose. Because if we can change by an order of magnitude, significant order of magnitude, the efficiency of a whole industry, that's cool. So it's not just doing research, research for research sake. It's a different level of excitement if landing it with one customer, but actually doing something that can change the whole industry in and of itself. And I think from Adobe's perspective, that value generation sort of means that sort of you have a it's cross supporting each other. And for me at the create and the team creating the products for this, I think it's fascinating because we can do things at a scale that you could not do otherwise. And so I think innovation at scale, keep on innovating, keep on seeing that next jump,
right?
And then executing towards that. I think that is fascinating.
Yeah, for me, it's like really the red line that you follow here. This intellectual stimulation, also the curiosity that you get here to just learn new things and get to the next level. I think that's the impressive red line if I had to summarize your career in like one sentence.
Works for me, but it is fascinating, right? For me, it's I can get up, I can be on a hike and I have an idea, I write it up in my notes, I go back on it, I test it, and now I have data, right? I can run it through thousands of customers. I can formulate a hypothesis and I can validate. And I think so it is, I think it's the juice of creativity. And creativity, if you then combine it sort of with value, creativity for some value and driving value and thinking about how do you do it in order of magnitude, not just, it's nice to do it stepwise. It's nice to sort of make a faster horse, but doing a car every now and then, to use the Ford analogy, is nice as well, right? So that's motivating for me.
Another challenge.
And the team. Sorry, Sylvan, but I think it's important, right? I think it's, and then if you can go back to if you can formulate that and you can show the path in a 6-pager for a couple of hundred engineers, you can take them along with that passion and that opportunity, and that's cool.
Absolutely. And one challenge, you already talked about the team and also the importance of culture. So one thing that is usually very tricky with acquisitions is how do you merge different teams and also different cultures and make sure that you don't kill your own culture with the acquisition. You seem to have managed that very well because you are still on board for 10 years plus, also with basically all of your teams that were there. So it's like, from that perspective, how do you manage that and make sure that to not kill your culture, but actually successfully manage to get two different teams together?
For good question. I think similar to the timing question, consciously, very consciously. And then you collect the experience across the team. But I think generally I would do it very consciously. And I was lucky enough to actually have spent time in the US. We had other folks. So we sat down and we thought about what will be different. What will be the culture shock? Even before we announced it internally, we wrote down what will be the questions that they have and we prepared. Similar to as you would prepare for a presentation, right? You think about it very consciously before. And then help the team to see the opportunities. Be very proactive. We were very proactive about, very conscious of our special role being in Switzerland when the mothership is in San Jose. So every year we had a couple of folks who wanted to go to the US. And so we had we used the motivation for proactively help the motivation of people to actually go into the US and have knowledge in different pieces of the organization. We consciously helped the company. We were coming from an open source. So in the first 2 years, we helped, encouraged, cajoled, supported, accelerated the use of modern tools. So, for developers, very essential. And then we dragged out the integration until we actually had the tools in place, and then we came in there. So very consciously, you take a look at the opportunities. Now, is the tools really important or not? It's a bit of piece. It's sort of having people in the US, does that make or break? It's a bit and piece. But it's very consciously approaching it, realizing where you're at, but also realizing what the end goal is. And the end goal is good integration, good meshing of the opportunities that we have, and very active in the US customer base. Again, that's for us important, representing, taking advantage of having a development center in Europe. So we created the Visit the Factory. We have a special program where customers can come and smell the oil and come into the Basel factory. And it's not like we have oil, but I think they can ask intellectual questions that the marketing material doesn't cover. They can go to any depth. And so you create programs to get to mesh with the strategy of the organization, to share the information, and that worked out. And then be nimble, right? The constructions, move with the flow. Look the opportunities, yep. Grab the opportunities when you have them. What you do as a startup continues as you're in the other shape, right? You be open to the opportunities, grab them, go consciously after them. The fire keeps on burning, and the opportunities are still there. Go look for them, and I think it worked out. It's keeping on working out, and it's fascinating, and it opens up new opportunities. And be nimble, take it very consciously, and be proactive. Don't Absolutely. Let it happen to you.
Right. Makes sense. So you also mentioned the Basel factory. So today, Adobe employs a low 3-digit figure of people in Basel. And I actually wonder, why is Basel still so an important part of Adobe's success and also product nowadays, 10 years after the exit?
That's all. No, seriously. I think that the point that I mentioned earlier, that the realization that the products that we do get created through humans, and humans' creativity is dependent on their well-being and common respect. I think that is a core essence of Adobe. And so I think there is a high level of respect of the experience and the motivation and the drive of the team. And I think as a company, we cherish the individual and their ability to create in whatever form. And the team here, I think, and we have multiple of the acquisitions. So the Go acquisition is still in Hamburg that you have. So I think Adobe tries to consolidate when it makes sense. So we have a couple of areas where there is war or where there is political instability. There we actually help folks to relocate. We do want to make sure that we have know-how in the relevant regions. We do want to make sure there is an economic distribution. So you want to balance multiple objectives. But I don't think Adobe is looking at growing and through creativity and creating the product and the innovation. And so therefore respecting the people, encouraging the opportunities for, as I said before, right? And I think that's interesting, but also respecting the knowledge and the production capacity that's there.
Got it. So when they software started, they was basically, or still is to a certain degree now with Adobe in Basel, the cluster for content management in Basel. So I also wonder, what do you see as the future and also the importance of Basel in the future? Where will the Basel area go in terms of importance for a startup or also economic ecosystem?
I think Basel is interesting. We do have folks that are coming from us from the Alsace. We have folks that are coming from us from the Black Forest, and it's not St. Nicholas, or we haven't been able to hire him yet. But for those that are not of Germanic background, actually Google or check out Wikipedia, the story on the 6th December of St. Nicholas. It's a different story, but I think that gives a diversity of education, a diversity of language, a diversity of cultural upbringing that is an advantage that we can see, especially because we have customers which only speak French, or customers when I start to speak my version of Hochdeutsch, they think I am speaking Swiss German until I really switch into Swiss German. And so I do think the language, especially with some customers, is an advantage. I also think that there is different economic opportunities that you have here to take a look at. So there are some local advantages. We do have, we're very close to Zurich, and if you look in US time zones, also to Lausanne, we have quite a few folks that are working for us here in Basel who actually finished their studies at EPFL, not just me, but a couple of folks. So, and we have folks that come from the outside. So the future for Basel, I think, as you look at sort of as a technology hub, I don't think will overtake Silicon Valley any of the next weekends, being realistic. On the other hand, I think there is a interesting diversity being within reach, but at a different setup. It's a differentiator from a global Basel area. And then I think as you look at it for Adobe, I have picked this up on the last day when the office was open, sort of the center of excellence for the Adobe Experience Cloud. I think we are a know-how center. And so there is a lot of innovation coming out of the team here. Innovation happens worldwide, but I think I do see as far as I can look into the future, that I think this leverage of the existing experience of having tried many variants, having succeeded and failed, that experience allows us to do order of magnitude better innovation than anyone else out there. And so I do think that gives us and the whole team a great future, gives Adobe a great future. And then also having a knowledge center in the center of Europe, which is a relevant market. So don't get me wrong with the US market, but I think it is a relevant market. I think it also helps with the time zone differences if you want to offer a 24/7 service. So there's multiple advantages to having this location. And we're not the only technology vendor who's here. There's quite a few in Switzerland. Again, not as many as the Valley, but it's not zero. So we're quite comfortable. We're excited. I think we're excited at looking into the future. And I think if you look at the drivers, right, the fundamental drivers of the continued automation of the artificial intelligence, or even if one of the products that we call screens, which is the information on digital screens. Touch screens these days is a little bit less motivational, but I think you can still interact with them without touching them. I think, and there you have the price that keeps on dropping according to Moore's law. So there will be more and more of them, which means you want to have more and more of your experiences projected there. You have store-in-store opportunities. So I think that with these changes that we're seeing in these special times with COVID, the digital channel is just going up. And how do I get the right content in the right time to the right audience is a challenge for many of the folks out there, of the enterprises out there. And I think we're excited in helping them. And as we get more automation, as we get more intelligence there, we can take out some of the mundane tasks and more of them. To give you an example, in February we were monitoring 27,000 activities, and now we are at over 100,000, right, in just a couple of months on that system. And so nice. You have an infinite growth of stuff that we can monitor and take automated corrective action or suggestions. And I think that the snowball effect of being here and then accelerating it will just go on. And I don't see the end of it, right? And so that's cool. I don't think there is. I don't think we're head limited. There is so much more that our companies and small businesses, large businesses want to do, and we enable them through reducing the friction, helping content velocity, helping getting the message out so that the offering can get to the needed, that the government service can get to the person with, and there's I don't know. It's infinite opportunity. We do have a total addressable market of a couple of billion, but I think there is also a dark space to the market beyond that. So I love it where we can go. I love sort of the location in Basel, and I love all the locations that we have worldwide, which add their cultural diversity and help us run that around the clock. So very bullish on the team and very opportunistic. I think there is a lot of opportunity. Opportunistic is the wrong word. A lot of opportunity in the Basel area.
Absolutely. So there's a bright future ahead for the Basel area. But of course, that also raises the question, what's next for you personally? Another 10 years at Adobe, or what are your plans as an individual person?
Well, if I can keep on changing industries, that's quite enticing. So I think it's always a good question, but I think right now the opportunities to change the world are fascinating. But then again, as you said, I'm intellectually curious, right? There's quite a few projects that are interesting. There's a couple that I'm coaching to help them in different areas. So there is enough intellectual questions out there in the world to keep me busy and to keep the team busy. And as I said, I think the opportunity on the product is there, and I think on the region, I think in Switzerland we have a lot of untapped opportunities that have some intellectual challenge.
Right. So to also keep you busy until the end, we have two last question sections for you. The first one is, are there any personal resources or gadgets that you can recommend to our listeners? That can be books or blogs, but also technical things like an app that you like to use or a specific tracker. I see you have one on your wrist. What tools and gadgets can you recommend to our listeners?
Well, you're right. I think the Fitbit is sort of my keeping me honest, because otherwise, if I get too intellectually grounded, I've get to actually get going. And so I think the balancing all the pieces keeps the mental health going much better. And then for me, it's also getting, the whole biorhythm of the system that you have that is helpful. I think if you look at Adobe, we have quite a few tools that are cool to use. I'm, Photoshop users myself, but we also have Photoshop Lite. There is Camera. I think check it out. There is a lot of stuff you can do on the creativity side. I think on the personal side, I'm an Evernote new user, and I use Mind Map. I think both of those for taking quick notes when I'm on the go through any device to sort of then have the follow-up afterwards. Generally, I like concepts. So I do read up on online and still books, and previous generation. I actually have paper books. And what I'm looking for are interesting models. How to help, once you actually have those customer feedback, to put them into perspective.
Nice. So the very last part for you are 5 rapid fire questions. I give you either a short question or a selection of 2 to 3 options, and you have to make one selection or answer in one sentence. Are you ready?
Sure.
So the first choice, United States, Europe, or China?
Europe with a US mindset.
I like that. That's a good one. Public or private company?
you can learn from both of them and apply it in the other.
Okay, fair point. Engineering or business?
Both. Engineering without business that doesn't get me excited. So I think the engineering for value is what matters.
Yeah, the killer combination, basically. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Allow myself to be even more audacious.
Nice. And the last one, Basel area or Silicon Valley?
The commute is a heck of a lot better here. So I'm a Basel guy.
Fair point. Jean-Michel, thank you so much. That was super interesting and also fascinating to see your energy levels. And it was just a lot of fun recording the session with you. Thank you so much for sharing the story. And we wish you and Adobe all the best with hopefully many more 10 plus years for the future of innovation and product and business combinations. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sylvan. And let me acknowledge that these are special times and our energy has to stretch to technology, innovation, startup, and our families. So, I'm happy that after 20 years here at Adobe, I can keep on innovating. But for all of you, do pay attention to your health, to your families. I think that's important. So everybody, please stay well, stay safe. And thank you very much for having me and listening if you're still listening.
This episode was brought to you by Swisspreneur's main partner, Clara Business, the digital all-in-one solution for small businesses. Managing internal processes manually and on paper wastes an incredible amount of time. That's why Clara digitizes everything, allowing you to focus on what really matters, your core business. Go to clara.ch to find out how your business administration can be simpler, faster, and more efficient. Again, that's clara.ch.